Hi, thank you for joining us for The Savvy Entrepreneur. Today we'll be speaking with my friend Corey Hollister, the previous CEO of American Cannabis Company, Inc. So Corey, thanks again for joining us today. I'm excited to learn about the early days in the cannabis industry. Can you tell us about your early experiences right after legalization?
First off, it's great to be here, Talis, and appreciate it. I think there was really a lot of many wonderful things there in the early days, especially in cannabis. One of my favorite being that there wasn't a big barrier to entry. A lot of people who had, very small startup operations were able to partner up and find their way into some of these deals and get an opportunity to participate. So that was really, I think, a wonderful benefit for how we did things here in Colorado. As we progressed a little bit, that changed, especially in the eastern markets where a little bit more of the fear and money operated and the barriers to entry became much higher. But definitely in Colorado, California, Oregon, Washington, it was really a great opportunity for entrepreneurs to be able to get involved in a really emerging market. So that was wonderful.
Yeah, it must have been really interesting. I mean, you guys were really the forefront of that industry. Can you tell me about some of the earlier business endeavors you took in the cannabis industry?
So my first endeavor was a dispensary in Boulder, Colorado, the Village Green Society. And that was one of the first regulated dispensaries in 2010. So really one of the first state or federally licensed in the world. And so we were all very excited, and it was a lot of really fun times, kind of pinch yourself at what we're doing and what we're involved with, and really, mission driven and helping people and righting some of the wrongs from, criminalization and what had occurred with cannabis. So, and then also a lot of rapid change. The regulatory framework was always changing. Here in Colorado, we had a really interesting kind of component right about when they were doing the initial licensing. I'd say about 30 days before we were supposed to submit our licenses, they decided to change the framework, and they had all of the growers and dispensaries had to get married into what we call vertical integration here in Colorado. So that was, led to a slew of shotgun marriages for people who had never been in business before. So together, never decided to have these ownership teams, and us included. We had a challenging kind of first swing there because of some of that, but I think still led for a lot of people to get a wonderful opportunity to get in the space and get involved.
So is it still the case that most businesses in the industry are vertically integrated?
They've started to develop the licensing structure here in Colorado to allow for standalone cultivation, and they had the MIPS license, the medically infused products, so that ability was there. As the regulated adult use market has come on, that's opened up the structure, and so it's definitely matured. So, but there's many businesses that still operate in that vertically integrated model. It's a great model. And, if you have a good location and you're growing all of your product, it's a wonderful place to be.
Interesting. Do you think that there's more efficiencies to be had in the vertically integrated model or the specialization model, if you will?
Well, it makes a lot of sense, especially as you have the confinement of state. We don't have any interstate commerce, so the scalability is very limited. So especially I think in this early stages where you're servicing your primary market right there, we haven't gotten to large scale, cultivation, greenhouse, kind of outdoor. We're getting there, but we definitely haven't gotten to interstate commerce. As that comes on, we may see that some of that kind of smaller scale vertical integration goes away. But it's also, we've seen in the craft brew and other markets that there's that connoisseur market. And if you can have a good brand and a good brand strategy and you're servicing a strong local market, then you're going to have a great business.
Interesting. So you've done something that most entrepreneurs dream about, which is taking your venture public. Tell us about that process. It must have been fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, learned a lot for sure. It was definitely, school of hard knocks and school in the learning place. One I would always say, I've perused some of your book, and you touch on this. You've always had to have some seed capital and some seed partners, and on many levels, I put that out to my partner and wife, Carmen, who was holding a corporate job and allowed me to really play and take risk in, these entrepreneurial endeavors. But then, as to the actual process, really due diligence, finding that right partner. We were in a place where people were really excited. We were attracting a lot of attention into the cannabis market, and we felt we had a really good model and a diversified model, which was great and definitely helped us attract some of the interest in what we were doing. We ended up doing it via a reverse merger, which I think requires some extra due diligence on the deal and the components of it. But that was a quick and fast way for us to do it, and really provided a lot of credibility, especially in the early cannabis market, that we were willing to say, hey, we're going to get audited and we'll be open with everything we're doing, and help separate us from the pack on some levels.
Yeah, that must have been a really, really exciting experience. What is it like to be running or have run a company that was publicly traded?
But definitely as soon as you sign that deal, you start to take on all the components that go along with the public company, and that's the public image and the shareholders and the auditing, and being a cannabis stock in the early days and a penny stock. There's a lot of burden from the audit process. They definitely wanted to go through every receipt and every piece of inventory and make sure that they were as buttoned down as could be, which we ultimately appreciated because we were able to continue to file on time and represent that to the marketplace. But I think as I mentioned, for us, especially in cannabis, it added a layer of credibility. So that I think was key for us, and amplified our voice, allowed us to access some outlets for media and other places that allowed us to carry a little bit of a bigger message. So definitely some positives, and clearly cost is one downside. There's a lot of carrying cost of the public company.
Yeah, I'm sure going public really impacted your business model.
Yep, cash flow becomes critical, and really getting through those filings and those pinch points is a key component, as with all businesses. But you are carrying that burden of keeping the public company going and keeping those filings on time. And that's a big cash commitment, so you got to really be smart with how you're operating.
So if you could go back in time, would you have done it the same way again?
I definitely would have, and think that it ended up being a tremendous opportunity for us, and the cannabis space where we were, and how it helped propel us forward. There's some burdens we were not, especially here in Colorado, because here they didn't allow out-of-state residents to own any cannabis licenses, and the public company they deemed as including out-of-state residents. So we were prohibited from owning any dispensary licenses here in the state of Colorado. It was our own backyard, and that definitely was a bummer for us, because we had always wanted to regain that business and be in that side as well, not just the consulting and product side of things.
Yeah, I can see that as really hurting your old business model, but I'm sure you guys did well with the consulting side of things, right?
We did, and that was a wonderful opportunity. And also, we had a diversified strategy, which was important. We looked at products as the key component to what we were trying to do, and wanted to balance the lumpy revenues that consulting drives. So you're going to have your continual peaks and valleys in a consulting model. So products was a great way to balance that out. Cannabis was a little bit easier than probably some models to be able to include that. As we were securing licenses, we then moved to build and deploy these facilities, so selecting all the equipment going in them. And so that was a great source of product revenue, but then also trying to innovate and develop products for the space. So we had some of our early products where one was a cultivation cube, a shipping container converted into a quick upstart growing unit. Another was the satchel, which was a exit bag, child safety bag that allowed retailers to ensure the security of any product leaving the store. But as anything, regulatory changes made that obsolete here in Colorado, so it moved to more of a branding product, and we adapted that. But definitely, we were trying to innovate and look at how we continue to diversify. Also, soil was a big product for us, and was something that was always key. Looking at the industry, hey, every plant is going to be in soil or some medium, and if you can capture that, that's great to be.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So back when you guys went public, there weren't a lot of platforms or other options for people to raise funds from the general public. Nowadays, there's new platforms like Crowdfunder and Start Engine. What are your thoughts on some of those platforms?
I've not done any raises on them, but I love the idea. I love being able to create new capital opportunities for small businesses and new sources of revenue, new sources of capital, and also for investors to, or maybe not investors, but everyday people to be able to play as investors or get involved in the side of the community, and it's a great way, and also open up to a much wider audience. The investment community can often be very tight knit and very cloistered and hard to break into, and this is a way to, get a lot of eyeballs and a lot of noise potentially.
So, what do you have for tips for entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry or investors who are looking at putting their money in the cannabis industry?
One, I would say, don't feel panicked or pressured. We're still here. I think, not at this point of federal legalization. And I actually think COVID-19 and the stress of this on the economy may lead to a move at the full legalization at the federal level. But, so just a number of states have not even entered into this business. So I think there's so much potential and opportunity in the future. I think some states are making a strong effort towards social equity and opportunities to make these opportunities available to investors of all level and not just more wealthy investors. So I think that's a wonderful development within the space. So, I think being committed to your model, really having a good team in place, traditional components to a good business strategy, and understanding, that you have the model that's going to be successful for where you're trying to operate, and go for it.
Great advice. Because the market isn't vertical anymore, there's all these individual companies picking up different parts of the industry. Are there any industry segments that you feel are most ripe for innovation?
We're seeing a lot of development in the hemp CBD markets, and the CBD is one of it's called 80 potential cannabinoids within the plant. CBN is a very potent component. CBG is a very good appetite. So I think we're going to continue to see some very interesting developments with some of these isolated or specific CBD type products, and the innovation on the product side, we're continuing to try to grow up as an industry in terms of adopting solutions from other industries, or trying to birth solutions with our own space. So I think there's a lot of opportunity just for efficiency and improving how operations are working, and that's at all levels of the supply chain. So either finding something that is a pain point currently, or looking for a new innovation. There's always good strategies for where you're trying to break into a space, and I think there's plenty of them in cannabis, as with all industries.
Do you see anything in the forefront of fintech in terms of banking for the cannabis industry? Are there any new things emerging in that part?
That's gonna relate to the federal legalization, and once they blink, then we'll see it open up. They want to. They absolutely want to be operating and playing in the space. So it's just a matter of when the Fed decides to move, so that as well as the research component can get moving.
Can you elaborate on the research component?
So unfortunately, one of the main barriers to the advancement of cannabis is just the lack of research. So it's deemed a Schedule 1 narcotic at the federal level, which means no medical benefit, no documented medical benefit, and the limitation on any research by any credible outfits or institutions has let it remain that way. So we're finally seeing some breaks on that at the national level. Johns Hopkins, I know, is being proactive, as well as other universities. And so we'll begin to finally see some of the truly quantitative research to support the medical benefits, for specific diseases, as well as palliative care in general.
And you think that's going to expand the industry?
Absolutely, that'll broaden acceptance, which I think hemp and CBD really has done a great job as showing people that, hey, this is not just a recreational product, that there's a whole different component and potential here. And, I think that'll only continue to drive, as well as open up really, the biggest crime here is, access for patients who can be helped and who are being provided potentially deadly alternatives like opioids, with addiction, death, and horrible outcomes. So, it's time, I think, for us to be wiser and also move away from, the control that some of the traditional pharmaceutical companies have had on the health and medical industry.
Amen to that. So you've been in the cannabis industry a very long time, since the inception, basically. What are some of the biggest changes you've seen throughout that period of time?
Colorado's been a wonderful melting or kind of experiment, because it really allowed the free market to take care of everything here. So we've seen a ton of innovation, a ton of entrepreneurship, people being able to get involved and be successful. In the eastern markets, it's definitely been more of a restrictive cost, high barrier entry, really a fear-based approach, more in line with the propaganda message that's been out there. So I've not seen as much development there, as much advancement. California, Oregon, Washington always want to give a call out as their leaders as well. So it's been wonderful just in terms of an economic boom here in Colorado, and continues to grow acceptance and develop as a leader both in the community and in the economy. And I'm very excited about where we're going to continue to see the growth and potential in the future.
Yeah, really excited about the potential of this industry. So the other thing that you're really passionate about is corporate social responsibility. Can you tell me a little bit about your efforts to promote triple bottom line and other types of social corporate responsibility efforts?
Yeah, so I definitely, in my experience in being within the public company, seeing how that morphed over time into really the challenges of meeting the needs of investors and shareholders and our internal needs, to really want to begin to understand, what was going on in the business world in terms of how are we structuring companies in the economy, one, to service those businesses better, but also to meet the needs of the community and humanity better. I think all of us can agree that climate change and capitalism are at odds with each other on some level. We need to reconcile this, but let's not hate on capitalism. So some of the things that I became exposed to, public benefit corps is how we term them here in Colorado, which is a way to structure an entity with something beyond just shareholder primacy, as at the bylaw level. So environmental harm reduction, giving back to the poor, any of these things could be deemed as mission-driven components of the entity. So I think this is a great development. We're seeing this talked about at the highest levels with the CEOs of top corporations coming out, recognizing the challenges of shareholder primacy. And I'm excited to both help kind of support and work on this, as well as on the internal level, just how are we reducing stress, reducing conflict within these organizations so people can be more successful, we can innovate, we can grow, and all be happier while doing it.
Thank you, Corey. It was a pleasure chatting with you today. I had a great time. I really learned a lot about the industry.
Dallas, I love being here and love what you're doing, and thanks for having me.
Great. Until next time. Thank you everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time with The Savvy Entrepreneur.